fifth graders. I'm going to be reading you chapters 55 to 59 of A Tangle of Knots. So 55 is Toby. Here we go. Every time the memory weaseled its way back inside Toby's brain, it stung just as fiercely as though not a single day had passed. It twisted his stomach and made his cheeks burn, caused his heart to shrivel and shrink inside him. Watching Miss Mallory now, the way she was examining her hands so closely to avoiding watching Katie at her baking station, he remembered it all. And it stung. "Please don't take her away from me," Toby said softly. "Please, if that's what you were going to say tonight, please don't take Katie away. I don't think I could stand it." Miss Mallory kept her gaze on her hands and said nothing. Toby knew what it was to lose a child. That terrible day in Africa, just 1 week after his wife had died, he hadn't known. He couldn't have known how it would be, the guilt and the worry that he would suffer every day to follow. So he made the decision that he'd come to regret for the rest of his life. At the time, it seemed wise. After all, what had he understood then about fatherhood? Absolutely nothing. Better his precious baby Cora grow up with her new parents who could give her everything she wanted than with a half-wit like him. That's what he thought at the time. Afterward, he'd run, changed his face, changed his name, taken the job he'd never wanted at the Emporium, but Toby had never forgiven himself. Beside him, Miss Mallory cleared her throat quietly. "I won't take her away," she said, still studying her hands. "Even if I wanted to, You're the father she was meant to have. I can tell." She clutched her fist to her chest as though a severe pain stung her there. "And all I want is for Katie to be happy." Toby nodded at that, hope beginning to rise inside him once more. "I guess that's all we can ask for, isn't it?" he said slowly. "All we should ask for." He did want Katie to be happy. Cora, too, the daughter he'd never see again. Sometimes he found himself wondering what had happened to her after Dolores Asher had taken her to the orphanage that day in Madagascar. Had she found happiness, that tiny pixie of a girl with her beautiful braided hair? He hoped so. He'd hoped that, somewhere, she was half as happy as... Down on the main exhibition area, there was Katie, just as she had been a moment before, but someone else was there too. The old man. His palm was pressed to Katie's forehead. Toby leapt to his feet. "Stop!" he cried. It might be too late to help her, but he had to try anyway. That's what fathers are meant to do. "Dad, stop!" It's chapter 56, Zane. There was a piercing squeal, an alarm, and from the ceiling the safety sprinkler sprung to life, showering water down the entire length of the floor. The crowd screeched and began bumping this way and that, all of them. It was chaos. "Zane!" Marigold hollered at him. He turned his focus from the book to where his sister was pointing, across the room. He could just make them out through the screaming crowd and the gushing sprinklers. Katie was staring down at her cake, bewildered, and the owner, with the icy stone of talent poised to melt into his skin, was grinning. "We have to stop him," Marigold cried. "We have to stop him, Zane. Oh, I wish I had the talent to do something." Zane turned to her, eyes wide. What was it the man in the great suit had said about shooting in a healthy direction? "You do," he told her. 57. The owner. The owner didn't notice it as the first spray of the sprinklers hit his skin, but the arc of spit that flew from across the room was so perfectly aimed that there was no way it couldn't have hit his hand. Smack! It knocked the icy stone of precious talent to the floor. The owner dropped it to his hands and knees, scrambling to retrieve it. But even as he grasped at the talent, the spray from the sprinklers began to melt the stone right before his eyes. A fine mist rose from the pale pebble, slowly at first, then faster and faster, and soon everything Mason Darlington Burgess had ever wanted slipped through his fingers and floated up into the air, where it spread like a fog throughout the entire wide room. The owner screamed, he shouted, he wailed, but his cries were lost in the piercing screech of the fire alarm, and he knew it was useless. He'd spent his whole life searching for one thing, and now it was gone. And this is 58, Katie. As the sprinklers gushed down, Katie's gaze followed the curious mist, traveling up from the owner on the floor to the crowd around her, and then her eyes settled on one face in particular, the face of someone who was rushing her way. It was Toby, and then it wasn't. With every drop of water that landed on Toby's face, Katie noticed something new about him. His upturned eyebrows, his crooked nose, his cowlicked hair. Katie turned to the terrible cake she'd baked and ripped out the photograph that had found its way inside. "Dad?" she breathed. There was no doubt about it. The man standing before her was one and the same as the man in the photo, Katie's father. Toby looked from Katie to the photograph, slowly seeming to understand, while from the slick floor the owner let out a low moan. Toby wiped a soaking lock of hair from his forehead and blinked the droplets from his eyes. "I'm so sorry, Katie. I never meant." He blinked again. "I'm so sorry for everything. What can I do to make it up to you?" "Whatever you want, I'll do it." Katie took in Toby's new face from his unruly hair to his pointing chin. Her brain whirled slowly. Her forehead ached with a slight chill. What did she want? Katie looked around the soaking mess of her room. The screeching alarm, the panicked bakers, the sopping cakes, and then Katie couldn't help it. She laughed. "I think I just want to go home," she said. And Toby, with his imperfect crooked nose face, offered her a real smile. "Whatever makes her happy," he told her. Chapter 59. Will. When Will and his mother finally entered the convention center, there was rain indoors and lots of it, screaming, wailing, shrieking too. A fine mist wound its way inside Will's nose, making him feel like, of all things, baking. It was chaos, that was for sure, but Will didn't pay too much attention to any of it. With Sally snuggled tightly around his neck, he made his way through the rain to the biggest cake he'd ever seen, a 50-layer high masterpiece of sugary wonder. "Can I try some?" he asked, and the baker beside the cake, clutching his floppy, wet chef's hat, merrily shrugged. "Sure, kid," the baker replied, surveying the mess around him. "Why not?" And as Will and Sally leaned in for their first bites, Will couldn't help but grin. It really had been an adventure. And now we're at 1 month later.